So thank you all for coming today, and I will turn it over to Steve.
All right. Well, thank you. I have the honor of introducing Winter because I was the one who begged her to appear today. So at least I had some powers of persuasion. So I'll pat myself on the back. On behalf of the board, Winter, we're extremely excited to have you. Winter is an outstanding mediator. She is an outstanding speaker as well, and she has a great story to tell. And I think one of the interesting things for mediation groups, for mediators in general during the pandemic, is I think how we've been able to adapt. I think our industry, more than most, I think, had to learn Zoom on the fly and to do other things. And I think we got so focused on doing mediations like that one of the things that Winter's going to talk about, and it's truly inspirational, is how she got together with a group of 19 other outstanding women that they met online. I think they all were faced with the common challenge of how do you grow your business, how do you continue to do what we're trying to do in a pandemic. And so they all have a unique story, and they got together. They wrote a book. It's a great book. I think I've told Winter I was reading my book when I went to visit my parents for the first time I got on a flight after the pandemic, and I actually gave my book to my mother. So I couldn't reread everything, but I have read through it, and so I'm sure Winter will be telling you where you can get the book, and I think she'll give you a taste of some of the experiences that she and her colleagues share on it. And I think it's inspirational, and that was one of the reasons why I thought she would make an outstanding speaker. And with that, Winter, welcome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and talk to y'all. Yes, I say y'all. Y'all say that too though, right? In Texas. Sometimes I say it and I'm like, "Oh gosh, I'm talking to people from New York. They're going to laugh at me." Um, but thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I had to reschedule, but very grateful to be here today. This has been the craziest experience for me, just this pandemic and everything that we have been through. And I know it's been crazy for everybody. But when I talk to people about my journey and networking, and of course the book Networked, it's it always brings me kind of full circle about how I got here. And I'm always shocked and like kind of surprised about my own journey. It's funny for me. Um, I became a full time mediator in November of 2019. So, shortly before the pandemic. And so I, for a very long time, kind of considered myself to just kind of be a newbie. Like I didn't really know what I was doing. And then was kind of pulled aside by one of my mentors. And he was like, "You need to stop calling yourself that because it's just not true anymore." But anyway, so November 2019, I had quit my job and I was going, full force with this whole mediation thing. It'd been something that I had been building up to for essentially my entire career as a litigator. Um, and literally, like that was literally what I had wanted to do for 14 years. So I spent my entire litigation career preparing to be a mediator, and I had finally um, jumped and taken the plunge, quit my job, and just was in it to win it, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And suddenly I'm kind of staring down the barrel of this, I guess, proverbial gun, not knowing what I was going to do at all with myself, with my career. The only thing I really knew how to do was litigate, and I'd given up my job. People weren't handing out jobs at that point, and I didn't really want one. So I was like, okay, I got to figure out how this mediation thing is going to work for me. And I had absolutely no idea. My the firm that I was with, the mediation firm, closed down like everything else did, and we had no plan. The firm had no plan. for a few weeks. And so I cried for a bit, quite honestly. I just kind of freaked out like everybody else did. My husband is a musician, he's a gigging musician. That's his primary source of income. And the two of us were just kind of in a tailspin for the most part. And um, I, like I said, I cried for a couple of weeks and then I was like, you know what? You're tough. You can figure this out. Like, get up and figure it out. And I did. Someone suggested getting on LinkedIn. And I was like, who goes on LinkedIn? Like, I've had a LinkedIn account since like 2006 or 2007. I've never used it. Like, what am I going to do with this? But I got on and it was extremely different. It was like, I mean, it was like night and day different from when I had been on it the first time, created my account. And I was like, wow, people are really making strong connections, putting out amazing content. This is going to be like a really great opportunity um, to not only, meet people, but potentially build my own brand, right? And there weren't a whole lot of mediators out there really doing it. There was Susan Guthrie. I'm sure you're all familiar with her. She is, I mean, she's phenomenal. She's basically running everything right now with the American Bar Association. She has her own podcast, and I mean, what doesn't she do? And I started getting involved in different things. I was kind of overwhelmed by the whole thing to start, but just started paying attention. What are other people doing? And like I said, following Susan Guthrie, getting involved in different organizations and volunteering on committees. And in that process, I started noticing trends, seeing the same people over and over again. And I was like, well, this can't be a coincidence, right? I mean, I'm a lawyer. We investigate things for a living, so I'm like, let me get to the bottom of this. And in that process, though, I also started noticing the types of content people were posting. There were a lot of articles and people posting about things that they were just interested in. So, after a few weeks, maybe even a month of just reading, liking a few comments, I started trying to figure out what it is, or was past tense at this point, what it was that I could start talking about myself. What could I contribute? Like, what could I add to this community? And so I started with virtual jury trials, and which seemed to be a lofty topic at the time. And I put a ton of effort into the research, and I wrote this huge article and got it published in our daily report. And the thing went completely viral. It was crazy. I guess I struck a nerve. Folks were really interested in that topic at the time. And while I was doing that, I just started searching LinkedIn for people who were also talking about the same thing. And I came across Sherry Bellis, who so happened to be what we call a female LinkedIn rock star. I started commenting on her things. She had written an article also about virtual jury trials and her disdain for them. And we kind of started commiserating on our mutual disdain for the concept. And that turned into an invitation to join um, the female LinkedIn rock stars. And that, of course, turned into the book Networked. And it was fascinating. It was a fascinating journey. Please interrupt me as I'm giving this story because I feel like I'm kind of like talking to myself and like talking at a wall of people. I feel a little weird doing that. Um, and so please jump in, interrupt. But I joined this group of women and I was, first of all, super excited to join them because I had very little else to do at the time. But they were clearly so well organized and just centered around this concept of helping each other grow and thrive and genuinely supporting each other. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. And not that I didn't have like strong women in my life, but to have a group of, I think when I joined, we were probably at like 35, 40 women. Um, a group that large that was just determined that we were all going to succeed, no matter what. No matter what like area of the law we practiced, no matter where we were in the country, whether we liked each other, whether we got along, it really none of that really mattered. It was just about providing support and opportunities and just a constant show of support, frankly. Like that was just it. And whenever you had a question, whether it was work related, um, related to your marriage, your family, your kids, anything personal, there was somebody who is there to help you and lift you up and get you through whatever that issue was. It was amazing. It was really amazing, and it's a time in my life that I will never ever forget. So when the idea of writing the book came up, I was actually not part of the group when that happened. So the group came up with this idea of writing a book. I joined after the fact, and I don't know, they were probably just trying to round out the numbers. But they asked me if I would write a chapter in the book, and I said, I absolutely do not have time for that. I am at this point swamped with work. I just can't do it. Maybe next time. And I said no. I think I said no 3 or 4 times. And then finally, one of the women called me and she said, I know you don't think you have time for this, but you need to make time. This is going to be a big deal. You need to do this. And I said, and I'm a complete softie. So by the time you call me and ask me to do something, like I'm likely to say yes. So I said, all right, all right. When do I have this chapter written? And she said, well, actually, the deadline was like 2 days ago, so I can give you 48 hours. So I was like, oh, okay, great. So I just kind of like buckled down and wrote my chapter, and obviously just wrote about my experience with leaving the law and becoming a full-time mediator, meeting the rock stars, and how they'd helped me until that point. And I think it was probably, I think I want to say June of 2020 when I was writing this. So it's an interesting little snapshot of my life, which is really, really pretty amazing to read when I look back at it. So I would encourage you all to read it, because the book is, as Steve said, it is phenomenal. And I'm not just saying that because I wrote one of the chapters, but it is an anthology written by 20 women lawyers. And it really is, it's all about how we banded together and overcame our individual struggles. And so each chapter is very, very different. It's reflective of each of our personalities, everything that we each were going through, and we all had very different concerns. So for me, I was obviously starting a brand new business from scratch, from literally nothing. There were a couple of other women who were doing that as well. So our experiences doing that, they were varied. We were in different parts of the country doing different types of things. So that's really interesting. And there were other women who were just trying to keep their businesses going. There were women trying to make sure their constituents were doing well, because they were public officials. There were women trying to make sure their employees were being kept afloat. Women talking about their families. I mean, just just the the real world issues that women were facing, professional women, mothers, that we were all facing at that time. It's really amazing. It is such a cool snapshot. Um, and I don't want to like jinx us and say look back on, because we're not really done yet. But I want to say look back on um, with a little bit of nostalgia already, because times have changed so rapidly and so dramatically. But for me, it's great to look back at it and think about how much my life has changed. And when I wrote my chapter, I talked about how much my life had changed up until that point. Like, I always feel a little bit guilty saying that the pandemic was really a positive time for me. It was an amazing time. Like, my life got so much better, but it really did. Um, I have a lot of respect and give a lot of deference for people who struggled during that time. And I'm really grateful that I was not one of those people. I definitely could have been one of those people. Thankfully, I was not. But for me, looking at what I was able to do and somehow how I managed to do all of it, it is really just, it's overwhelming in the beauty that that it holds, right? I went from having just this overwhelming sense of hopelessness, frankly, for a couple of weeks, not having any idea of what I was going to do, finding this power within myself to say, no, I can and will do this, being determined that despite not having any idea of how I was going to do it, just knowing that somehow it was going to happen, finding this amazing group of women seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, I was certainly never the type, and at this point I guess I am, but I was never the type to like meet people online and like form real relationships or even think that that was a possibility. I never thought that. And so now, I mean, all of my best friends are people that I met on LinkedIn and have never met in person ever. So I think of all of that and how I now have a successful and thriving mediation practice. I'm fully supporting myself, my family, after a pandemic. Like, I did all of this from my home. I created a studio in my home. I learned about sound and created a podcast and just all of these things, creating creating opportunities for myself through the internet and through being willing to interact with new people and meeting new people and learning how to provide value to strangers. It's just it gives me goosebumps, really, because I never could have imagined that I would be here today. Never. Never, never, never. When I started my journey as a mediator, did I think that I would be successful? Of course I did. But it looked very different to me. It was a very Atlanta based thing. Like, my career would have been very focused on the people that I already knew. I'd spent, my entire career here in Atlanta, about 12 years, um, building relationships with the local attorneys and, meeting with them face to face, having in person drinks and lunches and cocktails and all of that. So it was a very, hands on type of networking. And in the course of, I don't know, however many months it's been, I have taken that and elevated it in such a way that now I am able to mediate in Turkey and what? And in India. And I am giving CLEs internationally. And I'm able to speak with you guys. And that's not something that would have happened before. And I just, I'm, I don't know, just kind of in awe about how it all panned out. And it really just comes from having a very positive sense of self, I guess, maybe. And feeling as though I have a lot to offer and wanting to share it and being willing to share and wanting to see everyone around me succeed. Being very open with my information and my knowledge and never being the type of person who hoards contacts, I guess, always being willing to lift someone else up. I think we get ourselves into trouble when we start to be very selfish. Um, at least that's always been my experience. I find that the more that I give, the more that I receive. And we go back to that whole adage of you reap what you sow. And it's very, very true. Like the more I give away, the more I receive. And whenever I've been in a position where I didn't have much, November 2019, right? I just started giving things away. I had I had my knowledge, I had me, and I just started investing more into myself and working on developing more skills. And anytime I learned something, I made sure to share it, whether that was just through a post with like the LinkedIn community. And I say just a post, my posts get, you know, tens of thousands of views. So it's a lot of people who I'm sharing the knowledge with. But um, giving things away freely, and then when people reach out, being willing to continue to help them, I think lifts me up as well. And so we talk about networking in the sense of like a very selfish sense, right? So we think of it as, well, I'm going to meet with this person so that they know me and they know what I have to offer and they like me. But networking is really more about a sense of community and providing knowledge and information and benefit to the people around you. Is when you make the people around you feel better about themselves and you provide them with knowledge and a benefit, they're more likely to want to help you, which of course is ultimately selfish. But you have spread some love around. Does that make sense? Because y'all are just kind of staring at me.
Well, I think it makes sense, Winter. How's that?
Thank you.
We'll have a little interaction here. One thing, because you asked for some questions, so maybe we can. I'll ask some softballs, and make sure everybody's, on the same page. Obviously, network has come through LinkedIn, and you're talking about LinkedIn. One of the things, I don't know. You said when I first joined LinkedIn, it was completely different. I had it, it was dormant. I thought my view of LinkedIn was that's what I will get active on if I'm looking for a job, right? That's
Yeah,
kind
essentially.
of what I thought it was. And for me, because in a lot of weird ways, Winter and I are completely opposite, right? But in a lot of ways, we're very similar. My law firm, I came to Austin in February of 2019, and then just decided with my partners it wasn't going to work out of Austin. So I went full time just a couple of months, before you. I became a full time, mediator in August of 2019. So not too much,
Right.
but I had the further. I had just moved to Austin from Chicago thing, going for me. So, for me, LinkedIn, it used to be people blog, right? They had their website and you'd have to post a new article every day on the website. And so one thing for maybe some of the people out there who don't use LinkedIn and aren't completely, relating to what you're saying, Winter, I have kind of turned now into, if I see a case, if I have an issue or just something going on in my life, my last few posts have been about my move, right? I wind up posting on LinkedIn almost in lieu of blogging or in lieu of doing my website. So what, I mean, I don't know if you kind of agree with that, or what's kind of your, you've mentioned LinkedIn a lot. What, if you could just be a little more specific in terms of what types of things that you're doing on LinkedIn, and what have you found to be, obviously you're getting thousands of people to look at posts. So there's things that you're doing that have really increased your exposure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Um, I started out writing a lot of articles. I thought that was the best way to go. And then it became overly taxing, right? It was just so much work. And I'm like, there's got to be an easier way to do that. So I just started talking about things that were happening in my life, and my views skyrocketed. No one really wanted to hear a whole lot about on a regular basis, the intricacies of mediation. Do I talk about that? Yes. But I only talk about it when it's something that I'm feeling very strongly about for whatever reason in the moment. It might be because something crazy happened to me at the mediation the day before, which happens, I don't know, probably weekly. um, but like for example, today I wrote about feeling kind of burnt out just in general in my life. And I hadn't been posting that much on LinkedIn. I just couldn't get myself like up in the morning to do it. I was taking my kids to camp and just dealing with like life stuff, and like trying to get on LinkedIn was like not at the top of the list. And so I talked a little bit about that and trying to figure out why that was, and is it a because of the transition from, COVID to post-COVID? Like I have no idea. It was kind of a crowdsourced thing. And so frankly, writing about those things is a heck of a lot easier than researching an article for a couple of weeks, right? That's easy. Um, but it's also very helpful when you're trying to connect with people. And for me, I would rather do that. And you have to consider really what it is that you're trying to accomplish. When you're trying to decide what you're going to write about, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever fits, what your goal is. I mean, if anyone has questions about what platform they should be doing what on, I'm happy to talk about that. The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn though. So just look me up. There isn't any other Winter Wheeler. I don't think there are any spoofs on me on LinkedIn yet. But reach out. I can give you some tips on that. But for me, what I'm trying to accomplish at this point, I'm headed more in the direction of a lifestyle brand as opposed to um, the more intellectual brand that I was kind of headed for in the beginning. Things have changed for me a bit. Um, Trying to connect directly with people with working parents, things like that, it makes a lot more sense for me to talk about what's actually happening in my life and trying to connect with people on an emotional level. First of all, I'm constantly trying to work through my own feelings and emotions anyway, so it's pretty easy for me to come up with that kind of stuff. My therapist is very proud of me and my ability to figure out what I'm feeling these days. But yes, that's been what's really worked for me. Trying to talk about things that are really happening actively in my life, giving genuine, writing genuine posts about what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling. One thing that I talk about a lot, not necessarily on LinkedIn, but when I'm telling people about the best ways to network and build your brand, things like that, you have to talk about things that you actually care about. People can tell when you're just making things up. If I was to start writing about video games, like people would be able to tell I don't actually care anything about video games. I would be doing like a bunch of research to come up with stuff. I would never get the wording right. I would never have the jargon right. I'd be talking to my 10-year-old about it. It wouldn't resonate at all. Like it would make no sense. So, talk about things that make sense for you and what you're trying to accomplish and figure out who your audience is and kind of reverse engineer it. I hope that answered the question. I'm not even sure.
Well, and I see that there's a question in the chat, so I don't mean to
Okay.
dominate this, but so we have somebody, and some of our members are not attorneys,
Yep.
but they're trained in mediation and are effective mediators. So we have a question here. Curious, do you have any recommendations for those of us who are not attorneys? I find it's difficult to make connections as a non-attorney mediator arbitrator.
Yeah, I mean, some of my, very close mediator friends are also not attorneys. I don't think that the recommendations change. I think that it's exactly the same. Your core group, your core target group is going to be the exact same people. You're going to want to hit it the same way. Now, the information that you use to do that is going to be different because um I don't know what your background is, right? So whatever your background is what you want to highlight. So for example, one of my close friends was an adjuster for 20 years, 25 years. So she talks a lot about that. That is what makes her an appealing mediator and arbitrator. So she talks about that. And that's what gets her in the door with a lot of folks. And she's had a lot of success with that. I don't have that to talk about, so I can't talk to people about being an adjuster. Whatever it is that you have that makes you stand out is what you need to talk about. You just have to tap into whatever that is. I think what is really important is to have a serious conversation with yourself about who you are. People are only going to connect with you if you know who you are. That is what the underlying message here is. It's about being genuine, and you can only be genuine if you know what you need and what you know. You can't, like, you could read my posts all day. You could type in the exact same words. It doesn't make sense if it doesn't fit you. If you can't back it up when people are commenting, it just doesn't make sense. People are going to realize that it's not you. So, whoever you are, you have to figure out what it is you can talk about. Think about the things I'm sure you've heard that question, like, if you had to give a TED talk in 24 hours, what would your topic be? And it would have to be something that you literally could talk about for 20 minutes very clearly at the drop of a hat. What is that? What is that thing? That's what you need to be talking about on LinkedIn. That's where you would start, at least.
Well, I think one theme for you is that I have found with you and frankly your co authors of the book is, I think authenticity resonates, and I think one thing that I was surprised before, with the pandemic was how much that still resonates online. I think we all felt before you go to a cocktail party and you meet a couple people and we all think we have good radars for who's authentic or who's not, but I think you were always worried, online. Oh, I don't know who's behind their keyboard. But I really do think in kind of how your colleagues approach networking really kind of destroys the myth that you can't be authentic online. Or does that, that's one thing I found when I've, because obviously I've met, some of your colleagues, as well the same way. I'm not part of the group, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and it's the same thing when you think about how we mediate online, right? And you're having to size people up through your screen, and you can do it. Now, you you can be phony online, but you can't keep it up. For your average person who's not, not a trained mediator, not trained to read body language, not naturally talented at what we do on a daily basis, they can be fooled for a little while, but you can't fool them long term. And then on top of that, how exhausting would it be to have to keep up some kind of facade, right? I mean, I just don't think it would work. I've seen people try to do it and it hasn't worked. um or people who just have their assistant do all of their writing or all of their responses. It's apparent when it's not the actual person doing the responding. It is readily apparent. I'm like, oh, her assistant's in today. Like, you know um I think that we all be duped? Sure, but it takes a heck of a lot of work. And a place like LinkedIn is not, it's not conducive to catfishing on a grand scale. Something like Facebook, maybe Instagram, you can catfish, but it has to be like person to person over a significant period of time. Whenever you hear about somebody being phony online and like really like reeling people in and scamming them, it takes a lot of one-to-one contact, learning a lot about the other person and feeding them what they want to hear. We're making internet posts all the time. So they follow a theme, right? And you follow a general theme that you can see just you can see someone's personality in each of their posts. The wording that they use, the syntax, the cadence. It's hard to fake that. Can you? I guess sure you can. But I haven't come across a good fake. There are bots out there. They're pretty easy to spot. Um, Authenticity is key.
All right, we've got another question in the chat. Stea says she finds a lot of what you're saying relatable and thanks you. She finds herself overwhelmed with how quickly things can change on social media. It's hard to keep up with trends. Do you find you have to constantly read and research what's the new thing? And she can expand on that if that doesn't make sense.
Oh, it makes sense. Yeah, it's annoying. It's really frustrating. I hate it. Um, but it kind of is what it is. Um, there's really no way around the algorithms. But yeah, I mean, it's people are somebody's always out there trying to game the system, and they're typically happy to share that information and it gets around. It's typically easy to find. So if you have the energy to put into it, you know, you can
And
follow it.
just to make sure we're on the same page, when you talk about like gaming the system and algorithms, basically you're talking about how to get more people to, view and react, and then there's certain, times of day if you post, there's certain, if you can get people to respond within the first 10 minutes, then the algorithm thinks that this is something that's trending. Is that the type of thing you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And it changes all the time. And then, which hashtags are the best ones to use. Now, I'm not big on hashtag research. I just don't have the energy to put into that. I have a friend who's huge into hashtag research, and it works well for her. I just don't do that. I just use the hashtags that make the most sense for mediators, and keep it moving. Um, but I don't know. I mean, it's all it again. It has to do with what your goal is, what are you trying to accomplish, remaining, true to yourself. Again, we're talking about authenticity. How much time do you really want to spend on it? There was a point where I was spending like 4 hours a day just on social media. It was awful. Would I recommend doing that? No. Will I do it again? Maybe, but I pray to God I don't have to. It was awful. It was truly awful. Um, and I hated most of it. But did it work out? It did. It really did. And I don't have to do it anymore. And I have a functioning business. So I
Well,
can't say that it was a bad thing.
I love the answer that, 4 hours a day was awful. Will I do it again? Who knows? Maybe.
I
I mean,
mean,
but
if it works, it works, right?
well, yeah, and I think nobody asked me, but one thing in response to stay, I'll just throw this out and let me know um, whether you agree with this. One thing that I think is important to avoid being overwhelmed with social media is you have to be flexible and try not to drive yourself crazy as to what
Yeah.
works. Like I've had things like, I've been proud of it. I put it out there. I thought I was going to get a ton of responses, and who knows, maybe it was just people who normally look at my stuff were on vacation, and it just seems to go, into the, ether. And the next time I post something that I just did off the top of my head, all of a sudden I'm getting all these, views. So I think one
Mm-hmm.
thing for me, in responding to anybody who's feeling overwhelmed about whether they're on the cutting edge and the new trends, my only thing is I wouldn't get too obsessed about it, because what works on a Monday might not work on a Tuesday, even if you are pretty good with algorithms. Is that fair?
Oh, that's fair. It's totally a crapshoot. Now, I warn people all the time, don't necessarily do exactly what I've done. I'm obsessive compulsive, very type A, and often like exhausted. So now, did it ultimately work? Yes. Was I miserable getting here? Yes, but it worked. Um, I mean, take it for what it is. It worked. Now, there are some things that I had to learn the hard way, and then there are things that I will do anyway, right? So when I post about the podcast, I like to use pictures. You're not supposed to use photos on LinkedIn, right? But you're supposed to use photos on Facebook, and obviously Instagram is all about photos. I like to use the photos no matter what platform I'm on. Do I get dinged for that in the algorithm? I absolutely do. I don't care. I like the photos. That's part of my like authenticity thing. I like the photos. I'm going to use the photos. I don't care. Um, I mean, you got to figure out what you want to do. Now, I like to post at 8 o'clock in the morning. That works out well for me. That may have something to do with the type of people that I'm trying to interact with. I don't know. I know people in other industries who like to post in the afternoon. I don't know what that means. I have no idea. So what I've had to do is kind of just like test it out. And I keep track of what I do, not literally with like pen and paper, but like, oh, okay, well, today I posted at 7. Yesterday I posted at 10. The day before I posted in the afternoon. I remember one time I posted at like 7 o'clock in the evening, which you're definitely not supposed to do. And it was also on Friday evening. It was one of my best performing posts. I was like, well, what is this? I don't know. But you're always kind of like testing things out, trying to see what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I have never had a post do well on a weekend. And then, I've had other friends who've had amazing things happen on weekends. I have no idea how this works. I have no idea. So, if you can chase down some of those things, um, yeah, it's definitely worth it. Some of it is consistently true. Like I said, with the photos, you don't want to use photos. You don't want to put links in your post. You don't want to tag anyone in your post. Those things will always ding you. But again, do I do it every once in a while because I don't care? I do. Depends on what I'm trying to accomplish with that post. I think that answers the question.
Ah, anybody else have any questions? I All right, I feel like I'm monopolized. I'm going to ask one more then. Don't, because we talked a lot about social media, but it seems like we've been focused a little bit on LinkedIn, justifiably so. That's where you met, your co-authors.
Mm-hmm.
Both of us dabble a little bit with podcasts. So you actually were a guest on, my podcast. Um, and one thing that I struggle with, so I'm just throwing this out there, is sometimes like who I get as a guest. I'm constantly trying to figure out, why am I really doing this? Like, who am I doing this, for? Is it for me? Is
Yeah.
it for my guest? Is it, do I really have an audience? And so that's a different way to try to get, your name out there. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about, because I think before you started your own podcast, were really making a good circuit of being guests on other people's podcasts. I'm sure you've learned a little bit, probably what not to do from me and, some others. But, how does podcasting fit in?
Yeah, so I'm associated here in Atlanta with a mediation firm, and they have a podcast. And I was doing their show, I was hosting their show and did not enjoy that. So I wanted creative control. And so I said, I'm just going to make my own podcast, which seems like a flip decision, but I own a podcast production company and I have, I think, since 2015. We typically do true crime podcasts, though. So this was a bit of a switch for us. But that was why I did it to start. And it kind of started as a glorified business card, really. And then it kind of took off. So I've been able to turn my LinkedIn profile and the podcast into income streams. Really, they're additional income streams for me. And so that's really what happened. Then the podcast has also become a way for me to get in front of my local clients primarily. Um, and I'm getting a lot of requests for like them to want to be on the show, which is not exactly what I want to do with it. So I've only interviewed one of them so far. I haven't aired that either. I'm not sure I will. But again, I'm trying to change my audience from lawyers to kind of, and I'm moving into this lifestyle brand thing, which is kind of in the works, but that's a completely different topic. Um, but so that's how the podcast started. So it's kind of evolving. When I recommend doing a podcast, Man, if you have the time and the energy and the money to throw at it, sure. But you got to figure out why you're doing it. So I never intended or never wanted to make money off of it other than to use it as a means to get clients. So that was how I was going to earn money from it. It was going to bring me work. Did it do that? Yes, it did. And so now I'm trying to use it to get work in a different way. Has it done that yet? Yes. So it's worked for me. But I have put a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of money into it. Um, it's like anything else. You get out what you put in. Um, and I have put an insane amount of work into basically everything I've ever done. So I don't know. The photographs, the hair, the makeup, the music, I mean, it's a lot of work. It's definitely not anything that half-assed. So
Well,
I,
you talked about hair. We do have one question in the chat that says, I can see your lighting and camera and background are perfect, just perfect. Can you talk
thank
about
you.
how you arrived at the knowledge about this? So I know that's not an accident.
Yeah, definitely not an accident. I have training in broadcast journalism. So I knew I needed to get things ready when I realized everything was going to be on camera. Um, I got I got trained in on camera makeup and all and all of that and how to do my own hair. Um, Changed wardrobe, everything. My background is different based on my mood when I'm doing things like this, and changed my background based on the client. For usually it's the plaintiff when I'm mediating, if I know enough about them. Um, yeah, it's all very calculated. Not can't even lie.
And it looks like Carl, did you have a question?
Uh, yeah, sort of a question and a comment, I guess. I'm a volunteer mediator with the Dispute Resolution Center here in Austin. And first, I'd just like to say, Winter, because I think giving a presentation to a group of uh, boxes is pretty hard to do because you don't get much feedback. So I just wanted to tell you, you didn't know if things were resonating, but I think to me, what you're saying really does.
Thank
So you
you.
can't tell that from facial expressions a lot of times. So I really just wanted to make that comment. And also to sort of support one thing, I'm in a networking group in Austin of many different kinds of professions. But the premise of the group is, you give one presentation to the group and just tell who you are, what your life is, what your story is. That being a way to connect with that person. So I think that follows in line with what you're saying about authenticity. And the other thing that was really, I think, very interesting is your discussion of the power of the group to give feedback and to network. Uh, I don't know. I think women may take over the world in that regard, but I don't know if a group of 30 men could do the same thing. But I wonder if there's not much time left, but you talked a lot about LinkedIn and how that process went of actually building the group. It sounds sort of organic. It just sort of occurred, but I wasn't really yet quite sure how that happened.
I'm not entirely sure how it started. I think it was very intentional on our founders' part. And then women were added as we made sense to be added. It's all women lawyers um, that added value. We were vetted for the type of content that we created. I think there was some intentionality as to what areas of the law we were in. I was the only mediator at the time, I think. maybe I was the second, I'm not sure. But that was about as intentional as it was. We did not know each other. I think a couple of the women knew each other in advance, in person, but I didn't know anyone at all. And I think for most of us, that was the case. But no, it was not, there wasn't a whole lot of, I want to say there wasn't a whole lot of thought behind it, at least not for me. But thank you very much. I really appreciate your very kind comments. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I
Winter,
think
I'd
the
be
only other
remiss.
thing I saw in the chat was possibly Ron had a question, and that's probably gonna wrap it up if he does. Ron, you can unmute yourself if you do.
Yes, I'd like to know how to get the book.
Oh, yes, the book is available on Amazon. You can just search for #networked book.
Thank you.
I can attest it was easy to find.
That's good.
All right. Well, if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute. Otherwise, I think I can speak on behalf of everybody and say that we very much appreciate your time and advice and anecdotes. I know I enjoyed this, and from the looks of it, I think others did as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad I got to do this today. I appreciate y'all.
All right.
Thank you very much. Very informative.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, you too. Have a great weekend,
You too.
everybody.
Thank you, Winter. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
right.
Thank you.
Winter, I'm going to post. It's going something on LinkedIn that's going to, say your name in it, so it's not going to be viewed as much as because the algorithm. But we're on behalf of the AMA, we'll definitely be thanking you.
The way around that is to send it to me and I'll comment on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the trick.
All right. Well, I'll try that out.
Okay. Okay. All right, y'all. Bye.